Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, July 17th. It's Dan and Ben Buckner with Ag Resource Company in Chicago. We've got markets generally flat, a little lower. Wheat's kind of leading the way down. I think probably generally on harvest progress. A lot of things going on. We've got still no major trade deal announcements. We've heard something from Indonesia, but maybe that only adds about $1 billion to U.S. ag purchases. We've got a probable extension in China's deadline to get something done trade-wise. It's no longer mid-August, but we think rather mid-November. We've got Coca-Cola at least telling us they're not going to use high fructose corn syrup anymore, but rather cane sugar. Does that impact industrial corn use as a whole? We've got what I think are still pretty favorable growing conditions, especially in the principal Midwest, but also certainly heat places like Kansas and Missouri. So that's kind of a wrench into this. Also, of course, newly updated August and a longer climate forecast from U.S. Weather Service this morning. So lots to digest. Dan, will you break it down for us, please, sir?
Well, thank you, Ben. Yeah, there's lots going on, as you say. And I spent the time on the phone yesterday just trying to talk to as many agronomists across the Midwest that I could find to figure out if there's any pollination problems. That was hinted at in the market yesterday. And, we believe that there's a small amount of corn and maybe Grundy and Iroquois and some of those north central corn areas of Illinois that was planted early and somehow did have some pollination issues. But in a broad sense, none of the agronomists I talked to said that this is something that's going to impact U.S. yield or U.S. corn production. We'll keep our ear to the ground as we do in Ag Resource to see if there's anything going forward. Farmers check today. I think this is isolated to a few corn varieties and some plantings that happened in the April 14 to 16 timeframe. So we'll follow it and go from there. Yeah, one of the big news overnight is Trump and this push for Coke to use cane sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. If this were to happen, I put a graphic on the right. You can see that high fructose corn syrup usage has been in decline. Of course, we've needed a smaller corn grind accordingly. This year it was estimated about 405 million bushels. If Coke's completely, and I say completely, stopped using high fructose corn syrup, we believe it would maybe have an impact of 90 to 95 million bushels on the grind going forward. Not a tremendous deal, but still something important to watch and another kind of chink in the armor, if you will, on corn demand longer term. But I would also imagine that although Trump is a Diet Coke user of a sizable substance, I would imagine that he will also go to Pepsi and try to pressure them. So stay tuned to the headlines. I don't think the cola wars, if you will look this in terms of what their feedstock ingredient is over with, but I do believe there's this push to use less high fructose corn syrup going forward. As you look at the U.S. Drought Monitor that came out this morning, we're now looking at very modest drought areas across maybe northern Illinois, northern Indiana, stretching into North Dakota and portions of the plains. When you boil it down in terms of what this really means for corn and soybeans, we have 9% of the corn area that's highlighted in that map to the left there in drought. We have 7% of the soybean area in drought. Those are the lowest levels for this time of the year in years. And so we have to go back to 2018 and 19 to find less corn acres in drought. Now, this should help yield prospects. It should help the crop weather the upcoming heat. It is going to get warm during the last week of July, maybe the opening days of August. This is the warmest period of the year across the Midwest. We will see highs in the let's call it the upper 80s to lower 90s across the Midwest, not blistering hot. That will be delegated or domiciled down in the southern plains in the southwest U.S. But nonetheless, it's warm, and it's going to be something that gets talked about in terms of whether the sugar is passing from the stalk to the ear. A lot of people like to go back to 2010 and talk about that year in terms of seeing a big crop go south. This year, hybrids are more adaptable to that kind of heat. I would also mention that back in 2010, we had about 7.5 inches of rainfall in late July that really, along with that heat, did the crop some damage. I don't see that happening this year, at least at this point. So not sure that 2010 is a great analog for all of this, but it is going to be warm, and we will watch it carefully as we go forward. As you look at where we are in terms of that modest amounts of drought, this is a graphic from NOAA stretching backwards, and you can see in the growing seasons, I put that little arrow where we are. It's very low, very less impactful. So, as we get some rain, as the forecasts are suggesting across northern Illinois and Indiana and the Dakotas, this number will shrink even farther. So my mindset is still one of this is a special crop, though we do need to bring it home in August in the first 2 weeks of September. Looking at U.S. wheat, U.S. export sales this morning, the numbers were disappointing on corn. Only 3.8 billion bushels sold in an old crop position, 22.3 in a new crop. As you look at soybeans, 10 in old, 19.5 in new crop, and wheat, of course, we're in that new crop year already at 18.2. A lot of that being hard red winter. Now, as you think about U.S. corn sales, they're already well above the USDA export, but we will roll some of those sales forward. That 27.34, maybe as much as 150 or 200 million bushels will get rolled forward. And similarly, like in soybeans. So we are now into the last 6 weeks of the 24-25 crop year. We'll see how this all pans out. But again, no China sales of soybeans today. So there's nothing sold in a new crop position. I'm not hearing anyone from in the export community telling me that China's either checking freight or checking for offers on new crop soybeans in the year ahead. Though I do find China still down in the Argentinian market. I now believe China's bought about 4.5 million tons of Argentinian soybeans, which again cuts into the U.S. profile going forward. As we kind of finish up here, Ben, we did get the 30-day outlooks from the National Weather Service here this morning. The 30-day is on top, the 90-day is below. You can see that equal chances of precipitation with above normal totals down in the southeast U.S. is forecast. We're also not looking for that heat that's showing up in the last week of July persisting. That heat is likely to shift westward into the western third of the United States, both on the 30-day and the 90-day. So again, I really think this is a favorable forecast for August. We will have some heat, but I don't think it'll be anything of a lasting nature. Lastly, as we look at the forecast here, we do have the 10-day rainfall, ridge riding storms across the Midwest should water Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. Those are areas that need it, and also North Dakota. And then we had some record lows this morning, low temperatures in the Dakotas, which 39 degrees, one spot in North Dakota. But as you look at the 10-day anomaly on temperatures, that's the chart to your right. Notice that we have a varied mixture of warmth and coolness. So overall, I think we do have to watch this heat, but I don't think it's going to be overly damaging, Ben, as we get into the last part of July. With that, I'll turn it back to you. But my mindset is all stuck that if we don't get a trade deal with China and that trade negotiation is pushed back by 30 days into the middle of November, this is not good for U.S. export demand for soybeans or for corn. And I think that's my biggest concern here today as we look at a market that's at least in a couple of days.
Yeah, and all makes sense. And I don't know if ADM stock would be the best proxy for how this high fructose corn syrup goes, but that's something that we'll monitor. And of course, the yield debate is fair, and I think it's forthcoming. That's something we all can't avoid. But I do think, again, we're concerned about is risk management, cash supplies, supply and demand. I think if you are to debate or even lower, yield estimates, that really doesn't do much to the market. I think between now and November, we're still contending with probably 16 billion bushel corn crop, really large soybean crop. It changes the outlook December onward. So we still do think that risk leans bearish into harvest. We'll fine tune, sort out cash supplies that should be pretty abundant, kind of no matter what. So that's again we're looking for targets to catch up on sales, things like that. That's still the mentality that we think you should have. But otherwise, very good rundown. I think it's all weather for the next 10 days or so. So as usual, all the best in the market today. $1 gets you in. We've got some good research coming for 30 days. And if you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out.
Now, everybody have a good trading day, and we'll be back. But I don't think there's a change here to the bear markets, unfortunately. We keep looking, but as we wake up every morning, we're just not finding that in terms of world trade or crop supplies today. Be well. We'll talk tomorrow.